We're live. What we're going to do, everyone, is something interesting. We're going to do this for the first time. Is we're going to analyze the body language of the Trump-Putin meeting. And then Stefano, who you all know, ex-US intelligence, been on all our shows, will give it a geopolitical context as well. So Dr. G's been doing this for a long time. He's got a massive following. I let him do in the introduction. I think it's the first time he comes on the show. And he's been usually analyze criminal cases and court cases, but you do a few political ones as well. And I watched your video on the Trump-Putin meeting. I really enjoyed your analysis, very objective. I think I'm pretty excited to go through it and dig deeper and then give it that kind of bigger context on what it means for a potential peace deal. But Dr. G, I'd love for you to give a quick introduction for the audience.
So I'm Dr. G. I have a channel on YouTube called Dr. G Explains. I'm a clinical and a forensic psychologist. I'm also a body language expert. And the forensic part of psychology means that I do expert testimony. I've met with a lot of criminals. I've analyzed a lot of murderers, that sort of thing. But I also just love to analyze body language in general. I love to analyze politicians. I do a little bit of everything, but my primary area is forensics.
Interesting. And I told you just before we started filming that was my passion. I've never said this before, but I studied, I told you earlier, with Dr. Joe Navarro. I don't know if it's doctor, with Joe Navarro when I was younger, much younger. And it was a passion of mine. And I was just fascinated by how much one could learn from another when it comes to body language. And then I learned when I was much younger, I spent so much time learning how to control my own body language and then use it to my advantage. And then I got into sales. And obviously a lot of what sales is, door-to-door sales, is body language. I think just tell the audience, like, how much more information can you get from watching a meeting, just watching the body language, understanding the body language versus just listening to what they say, especially when it comes to politics?
Oh, it's such an incredible wealth of information once you understand how to decode it. Because basically there's two types of body language that we pay attention to. One is voluntary body language. So that could be something cultural, something we're doing intentionally. And the other is involuntary body language. So little micro expressions, little bits of emotion that leak out, because emotions always leak out. The less emotion somebody feels, the less that leaks out, but something always leaks out. So if you're analyzing politicians, they're very trained in what they're doing. The way they speak tends to be very specific, but you're still going to see stuff leak out. And that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and I also feel especially with President Putin, ex-KGB, he tends, from what I see, have a lot more control over his body language. So it's just a lot harder to read him versus Trump, who's a lot more expressive, reality TV, businessman, been on TV all his life.
Absolutely. President Putin seems to have an incredible amount of control over his body language, and he probably at least I'm guessing, he probably feels less than President Trump does. I think President Trump feels a lot. He doesn't try to hide much. So if he's feeling something, you're going to see it. I think he probably has an awareness of his body language, but he's someone who's very emphatic. I think he tends to be someone who is sort of the opposite of President Putin in that sense. But they still have some things they share in terms of body language, which we'll get into.
And one last point I remember learning when I was much younger is that one thing you look for is not just body language, but how that body language differs from someone's standard way of acting. So, for example, someone fidgets a lot, suddenly they stop fidgeting. That means a lot. So the deviations are probably one of the most important things one would usually watch. Is that accurate?
That's 100% accurate. Getting a baseline is the most important thing we can do if we want to get really deep into analyzing body language. There are certain things that are pretty universal. But for President Trump, for example, I've analyzed him quite a lot. So when he deviates from his normal behavior, I can really hone in on that and point those things out.
Perfect. And I'd love you to make those comparisons to previous Trump meetings with other world leaders, especially Putin in 2017, 2018. Stefano, what me and you would do, especially yourself, is, we've been on shows for many years now. It's kind of, whenever Dr. G analyzes certain body language, jump in, give us, tell us what that means, what that could mean for the negotiations and what could happen next. And we're going to do the same thing, by the way, for everyone. We're going to do the same thing on Monday, hopefully with President Zelensky. But let's kick it off. So Dr. G, or KK in the background, the guy that presses all the buttons, do you want to play the first clip? And while preparing the first clip, maybe Dr. G, give us a general overview of the meeting. What's your take before we start looking at various clips and trying to understand what they mean?
So basically, the main thing that we saw, and which we'll go into great detail of, is that it started out as a warm and a very clear attempt to get along. That's what you see when they first meet. And then later on, you're going to see President Trump looking much more deflated, much more exhausted, much more unhappy. So I knew that based on what we saw initially, if he was energetic during the later meeting, we know, hey, we really made some progress. He's excited about it. That's not what we saw. We saw someone who looked very frustrated, very deflated, at times irritated. So there certainly is going to be some interesting stuff to get into to compare the two.
Yeah, and Stefano, we did a panel yesterday. I had to jump off, but you also analyzed the meeting in depth. What was your initial take? And I'm sure you've noticed. I don't think you're a body language expert. Maybe you are, but everyone would have noticed that it started, at least on Trump's side, a lot more enthusiastically, and then he seemed very disappointed in that press conference. What was your take there, Stefano?
Yeah, no, and I think now that we've kind of seen the post reporting, it's kind of interesting. It depends on which news articles you're reading. So, for example, the Financial Times came out and said that they felt the Ukrainians felt betrayed, but now we're getting the Wall Street Journal reporting that the United States is committed to security guarantees for Ukraine. What I think is that President Trump had the mindset of we need a ceasefire immediately, and then that for him was going to be an easy win to claim, okay, at least I got the fighting to halt. And he was frustrated with Putin's perspective. But now it does look like that in some way, shape, or form, either because of Putin's ability to negotiate with Trump or because of just Trump's frustration in trying to get this war at end as quickly as possible, he's basically now taken in some way, shape, or form the Russian position where the fighting can continue while there's negotiations going on, which has not been the position either of the United States prior to this meeting, the European Union, or Ukraine. So I do believe that Trump, you can tell you don't cancel a lunch and you don't take questions from the press if it's a successful thing. This meeting was supposed to last 6-7 hours. There was going to be follow-on meetings, luncheons, etc. All that was cut short. The key thing, as you said, is Monday. But regardless, I think Trump was frustrated that he couldn't get a ceasefire. He cannot get Putin to agree to a ceasefire. For whatever reason, I don't think Trump wants to go the extra step, maybe either because he doesn't believe it will be effective or for other reasons. And so he's just going to go straight to the for the peace negotiations directly. But in the meantime, the fighting is going to continue. And I do believe Trump was a little bit frustrated with that.
Yeah, I agree. And Dr. G, let's dig into the first clip, get your analysis on it.
All right, awesome. Let me maximize this. All right. So I'm skipping when they're leaving the airplanes. There's really not much of value right there. So I'm going to jump right into right before President Putin comes walking up to President Trump. So
one thing, sorry, Dr. G, before that, I want to ask you one question before they shake hands. So there was some analysis done on the way they walked down on the planes. Now, I know some people like to overanalyze. They start analyzing things that don't really mean much, have low probability that they mean anything. So that some analysts were talking that Putin was, going down the stairs relatively quickly, seemed excited to go to the meeting. Trump was just looking down on the stairs and going slowly down. Does that mean anything? Really, does that deviate from how Trump usually goes down the stairs, or
not really?
Analyzing.
I'd feel like if I was to read too much into that, that would feel like it was overanalyzing, particularly with something like when you're walking downstairs, you're focused on not tripping and falling, all of those things. So I didn't read much into that. I watched that. It didn't feel particularly meaningful to me. So there could be, but I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And that's why I just don't like to have a lot of these body language analysts that overdo it. They like to analyze every single thing like it means everything. But let's go through that first clip, Dr. G.
Yep, got it. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit as we're going through this.
Yeah, I've seen this Trump, the way this guy was walking a bit sideways to get there. But that, again, doesn't mean much, as you said.
So one of the things you're already noticing is that President Trump is facing President Putin. That shows that he is trying to appear friendly, because he very well could stand facing forward, wait till he comes up to him and then greets him. But instead, he's really trying to give him a warm introduction. You see the smile right there. You see the clapping, obviously. The smile seemed real. You saw the wrinkles next to the eyes. Usually, if you tell somebody to like pose for a picture and smile, they'll do this. The eyes don't wrinkle. I think he actually is excited about this. I think he's looking forward to it. One of the things I'll be pointing out is also what he's not doing, because that's very important when it comes to posturing and trying to appear powerful. Right now, all of his expressions appear that he wants to appear warm and inviting. That's what the body language is saying right now.
What about the claps, Doctor? That's very unusual.
It is unusual, but first of all, that's very much within President Trump's wheelhouse. He tends to want people to feel energized by him. He's bringing attention to himself by clapping. He's making a lot of noise. When we don't want people to see us, we tend to be quieter. We tend to be still. That's quite the opposite. He wants everybody to see how enthusiastic he is about this meeting. So clapping is a way, knowing the world's watching, for everybody to see, I'm enthusiastic about this. I feel good about this. tend to clap a lot. Now, this is interesting. You see, President Putin just did two things right now that I think were really interesting. First, so it's taking a second to rewind. First, you're going to see that he nods at him. It looks like he gives him a quick head nod, and then he gives, it looks like a double thumbs up. It's a little hard to tell, but that's what it looks like to me. There's a little nod and acknowledgement, 2 thumbs up. That's a very warm way to acknowledge each other. It's actually not what I expected from President Putin when they were initially going to meet. So to me, this immediately introduces the idea that they are both going to be overtly friendly, not just as world leaders, but they actually are going to be warm towards each other, for lack of a better term. And the handshake, I think, is extremely important, because if you've ever watched President Trump do handshakes, he has a tendency, good, bad, or otherwise, to pull people towards him. And so it's an aggressive handshake, almost to show like, look, like I'm taking power right now. And so he didn't do that. And so I think it was an overt attempt to not try to pull any power plays right there, or to do anything that could offset the balance between the two of them.
Why do you think that is? Because I've seen, even in previous Putin meetings, I've seen him shake his hand and he just pulls them in. He's done it before to Putin, among other world leaders. Why do you think this time around he hasn't done it? Do you think it's just a lot on the line?
I think he so badly wanted this ceasefire, he was doing everything he could on his best behavior, for lack of a better way of saying it, really trying to make sure that he didn't do anything to offset or to throw things in any sort of chaos or disarray or anything like that. He really wanted it to go well, and I think he's going out of his way to not try to do things like that. So I think it was just because of the stakes, and because he wanted a victory more than anything, not so much that the ceasefire itself mattered as much as being able to say, look what I just did. So that was my take anyway. Let's see. All right, let me keep this going. Sorry to keep stopping, but I think this is also another important part.
No,
if you watch, you'll see that President Putin taps President Trump on the arm, and then he does it as well. There's this mutual mimicking of body language, and we do that with people that we like. So if we're around somebody that we're getting along with well, we tend to use similar phrases. So if they use slang or certain words, we'll tend to copy it. If they do certain types of body language, we tend to copy that as well. We do it unconsciously, but we do it automatically. So to me, that says there's a real relationship here, or at least President Trump felt there was. I think that President Putin is probably far more intentional in his body language, so he could be very well doing it intentionally. I think Trump's is far more unconscious in that sense.
Yeah, the mimicking, I think just on that mimicking point, it just reminds me of the old days, is that, so number one, it's like a little trick you could use if you understand body language. You mimic the other person, makes them feel more comfortable with you. And also a little trick that I used to do is like, I mimic someone and see if they mimic me back. That means that, all right, cool, the meeting is going well. If they don't, doesn't mean the meeting isn't going well, but like, hey, I start, questioning it a bit. Now, I want to ask you one question back to the clip though. Does it matter who tapped who first? Is that a show of dominance? I'm trying to see who's trying to be more dominant. A lot of people in the press was talking about how this was Putin's win. Putin was dominant. Putin showed strength. Putin came to the US, and Trump did not have his dominant demeanor that he usually has.
I would say that in that exchange, because Putin was the first one to do it, that he would be the one that was initiating that. So he would probably be the one that was pushing more for control. But despite that, neither of them is doing anything too overt. It's all very subtle, because sometimes people, like I said, if President Trump's pulling people in, that's a very overt thing of like, hey, like I'm being dominant right here. Neither one of them was being overt with it. If anything, it was subtle, but I would say it was probably President Putin, actually. Which is
good. Looking at the beginning of the meeting, it shows that there's potential for the meeting to go well. Both seem to have really positive intentions. They came in based on the body language. They both want a deal, and they both respected one another, which I think is really important for any negotiations. Let's continue with the video, but you seem to be nodding, so I think we agree. The smiles again, you can see that they're genuine smiles by both sides. There's no fake political smiles. It shows the old buddies vibe is still there.
I was really surprised by this, actually, because I expected President Trump to do that. I didn't expect President Putin to also share that. So to see both of them actually appearing what appear to be very real smiles was surprising to me, actually.
Agreed.
And one thing we just saw, and I won't rewind, but very briefly, you saw President Trump tap him on the back of the hand. To me, that wasn't a sign of dominance. Physical touch can once again make us feel closer to people. So I think that was, if anything, him just trying to continue to establish that relationship, just continue to try to show warmth in some way.
Interesting. So a lot of people did analyze that tap on the hand as, hey, I'm still the one leading this. I'm still the dominant one, as a way for Trump to regain dominance. But again, you disagree. You think people are overlooking this. It's just a show of affection.
I think so, because I've seen President Trump be dominant. I've seen him try to show dominance, and that just doesn't tend to be how he does it. He's much more overt. He's a very emphatic person. I am too. I have ADHD. I feel a lot. I move a lot. I can't help but talk with my hands. President Trump's very much the same way. When he's trying to be dominant, he doesn't hide it. He tends to turn his nose up to people. When we do that, that makes our neck exposed, because that's a very vulnerable spot. A lot of body language analysis has to do with survival mechanisms. So doing that lowers our survival rate. So we tend to show people, hey, look, you're no threat to me. I'm going to turn my nose up to you. I'm going to show you my neck. He doesn't do anything like that, and he has a tendency to. So I think that's too nuanced for President Trump for that to be a power play on his part.
Agree.
All
right. You're the famous Trump.
Yeah, exactly. That shows he's in his element. He's feeling a lot, and that's what we're going to see is different later on.
And the way you don't have to pause it, but the way they're walking, nothing there, nothing to look out for. Putin always has one hand that moves more than the other, the left hand. I think something to do with his time in the KGB. Could be not. I don't know.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I remember reading it somewhere, something to do with like he keeps one hand always still. They get trained in the intelligence to do that. I can't remember. Do you know? Have you listened to any lip readers there to try to understand what they're saying? Is there a lot of lip reading analysis? How accurate are those? There's one analyst talks, and Nicola Hickling says, Putin said, "I am here to help you," and then Trump said, "I'll help you," and then another person says, when the military planes that flew over just now, Trump mouthed to Putin, "This was for you," as a goodwill gesture. Do you think the lip reading, how accurate is that?
There's some lip readings that I've seen people do that seem to be very accurate, because there's a number of hearing impaired people that are just very, very good at it. So I think some can be. Whether those are, I don't know. But I think that some lip reading analysis seems to be pretty on point. I've watched a good bit of it, but
yeah. So that's what lip reading. You can play the video. You can start the video again, but then lip reading saying, "I'm here to help you." Is what Trump said. Putin said, and then Trump said, "I'll help you." I'm not sure how accurate that is, but you can play it again.
So I want to, and I'm going to show you one thing that I think is interesting body language wise right here, because people, after I made my video, people kept saying, well, he's doing all this posturing because he has a B-52s overhead and all of that stuff, which obviously is not body language related. But there is something interesting I think that Putin does right here that I'll show. So he looked up and then he watched them fly off, which to me suggested I don't feel threatened by this at all. I'm watching it. It's just there. Some people are saying that it was meant to be sort of threatening or something, which I didn't interpret that way. But I don't think that President Putin did either. He didn't seem fazed by it at all. He just seemed interested and was sort of acknowledging that it was flying overhead. So,
yeah, those bombers were a hell of a flex.
Yeah.
So another thing that Trump has done twice is pull his jacket together. He did it right after getting off the plane. Did it again now. Anything there, or we just skip it? Nothing important.
It's funny because he has so much body language that there's certain things that I just ignore that he does because he does it so consistently. That's
does
just
a lot. Yeah,
he does. Yeah, he tends to show a lot on his face when he's feeling. So I focus more on that. I would read.
Goes back to the deviations. If Trump does it a lot, doesn't mean much.
That's right.
Okay, they got that. Let's talk about the handshake. I think that one says a lot.
So. I'll play it again so that people can see it, because I do think the handshakes are important.
Yeah, because again, Trump has the palm up, which is that more submissive as some people are saying? A handshake with the palm up?
A lot of people suggest that, but
or it could be to pull his arm. Maybe that's like a habit of Trump. So it's easier to pull the arm when your muscles that way.
So putting your hand out that way, it is. I don't know if submissive would necessarily be the right word, because I think of Trump as seeing himself as being in complete power right now. So I don't think that him doing that, I think it's more of a way of saying that he sees him as an equal, more so than being submissive to him, rather than being dominant. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say another interpretation is that because Trump is used to pulling people's arms whenever he shakes it. So when he puts his arm up, it's just easier. When you're like this, you're shaking like this, it's harder to pull. But when you're like this, your muscles more relaxed and more able to kind of pull the person in. So it's just a habit of Trump of doing it this way. But his handshakes more than anyone.
Well, and everything he does is very intentional. That's one of the things to know about President Trump when it comes to something like that, like handshakes and all of this. He actively is thinking about. There are many things about his body language, like what he emphasizes with his hands. It's not conscious; it's involuntary. The handshakes are something that I think that he's practiced, and he has everything he does has an intention behind it. So I think that was very much on purpose.
How much do you think world leaders? How much focus did they put into all this? How much intentionality is there in body language?
As far as getting sort of microscopic like I do, I don't know how much they pay attention to that. I think that as far as how they come across when they're doing public speaking and when they're meeting other world leaders, I think they focus a lot on those things. I don't think they focus on it maybe to the degree that I do, but I do think that most world leaders have, and many business leaders have focus on the big aspects about how you're going to come across to other people. And things like that. So I think there's some degree of that.
I will go back to the handshake.
Sure.
He did also give him the tap again as well.
He did, right. And so once again, to me, I think that is an attempt to be a friendly gesture, because, like I said, human contact, physical contact is a way to be connected with people. I don't think that is an overt sign of saying, like, I'm dominant right now. I'm touching the top of your hand.
Yeah, they seem very relaxed as well, especially for such a high stakes meeting.
Absolutely.
And the cordiality of Trump letting him go in front of him, the chivalry there. So another analyst say this is a sign of dominance, because like men usually tell the woman to, a sign of chivalry, hey, go in front of me. You don't see any of that?
I didn't really. That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it in that sense. I think that for him, it's just because President Putin's the guest, so I think that he
exactly. That's what I thought as well.
Yeah,
that's what I thought as well.
Yeah, trying to be polite.
One of the analysts did say that it's a sign of dominance. It's like, hey, I control where you go. I tell you to go there. But I'm like, yeah, or it could be just respect. Putin is in the U.S.
That's the way I saw it. I think, I think it's unlikely that President Trump gave it that much thought, or that was an attempt. But I will show you one thing that he does right here that I find interesting. You see that how he bunches up his lips when he's disapproving of something, and this is actually pretty universally true. He just happens to do it a lot. When we do that, he does not like the fact that journalists were calling things out. President Putin, like saying things about Ukraine and all that. He is very much showing his disapproval right now, and that is directed at the journalists, not at.
Then you can see how expressive he is. Like, it's not hard to read Trump. He's really open with his emotions.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it for this clip. I'll go ahead and stop this.
Yeah, there's not much in the car. I think there's one thing in the car. I'm not sure if I'm going to play any clip there. The only thing I could understand about the car is that, so at one stage, Putin looks out of the window, just looks at, I can't remember, I think the photographers. But so one analyst says this is kind of him showing that he's relaxed, that he's not intimidated by being in Trump's car. I think they're over-analyzing, in my opinion, or he's just looking out of the window, could be for any reason. But there was not much. Was there anything else in that car ride that you could?
Not really. Just, they seem to be getting along. So it still seemed to be the same sort of feel, the same rhythm as when they initially met. They were just this was a pleasant meeting between two people thus far, and they were both clearly showing signs to be accommodating and cordial to each other.
So we'll play the next clip. I'm assuming this is when they're sitting to start the meeting, and I think there's a lot there, especially the way they're sitting.
There is. Let me get this started. Okay.
So while you're playing it, you can play it whenever it's ready. Just for the audience, what I saw is when you see Putin sitting, there's what do you call it? The man's skate. What's the word when a man sits with the legs spread out? There's a word for it. There's a word for it. So Putin's like, his legs were pretty spread, his thighs were kind of this angle, spreading, and just goes a lot of dominance. Trump, to my surprise. And they both had the hand. I think they had the hand like this, which shows, hey, I'm like a CEO stance. But his legs were more close to each other. And when you play the clip, people will see it. His legs were closer to one another, which kind of shows like he's just more to himself. And I think some people saw that as a sign of less dominance, can be a bit more nervous before the meeting. When you play the video, I'd love to get your analysis on it. Did you get the video yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're good to go.
Yeah, play it. Perfect. Good to go.
Oops,
there it is. You can see Trump's legs, and you're the analyst here.
Right. So you see, they both actually have obviously very similar body posture. Neither one of them is trying to take up space. That's one thing that we look for when it comes to somebody trying to be dominant, is that we literally physically try to take up more space, you know, like sitting with your arm up, those kinds of things. We see President Trump does that sometimes, but sitting and posturing in ways that makes you more visible, that makes you bigger. Both of them have the same sort of, it looks like they're both anticipating whatever meeting is getting ready to happen. I imagine that President Trump he actually looks a bit uncomfortable, probably because the press is there and yelling things out. And I think he probably just wants to get on with things because he's excited about the idea of accomplishing the ceasefire. So neither of them looks especially comfortable right now. That's for sure.
Okay, it's interesting. So, and the point that I made about, and please disagree with me if I say something wrong, because I read what different analysts have said and give my opinion, which is, you know, I barely have 10%, 2% of your knowledge. Do you agree that Putin's stance was more dominant, or not really? They're just both sitting comfortably. They both have a relatively dominant stance, but not too different from one another, like at the same level.
Yeah, I would say that as I'm looking at it, President Putin's is maybe a little bit more confident in that sense. I don't think that he like went out of his way to be much more dominant. It maybe a little bit. I would say it's pretty subtle. It'd be pretty mild. Nothing that he was. I wouldn't say it was anything overt. It was nothing he was like trying to do. Going like, look, I don't think he glanced over and saw who was sitting with, who was manspreading more, who was actually taking up more room in that way. So I think it's a little bit too subtle to read too much into that, in my opinion.
Perfect.
Can you make the deal today, sir?
We saw that Trump bunching up his lips again. He was showing that sign of disapproval.
Not happy about that. Yeah, exactly. Not happy about the journalists at all.
Yeah, he really, he does not seem to be a fan of a lot of these journalists. But as we talked about with the steepling, just so people understand what that means. So if you do your hands like that, basically, when you're sitting in a boardroom, it's not unusual at all. Yeah, to sit exactly like you're demonstrating.
I do all the time, exactly.
Yeah. And so what this does, it unconsciously signals to people, I'm the expert. I know what I'm talking about. It is a genuine sign of dominance when you do it in front of other people. We've actually got research that shows that if expert witnesses do that while they're providing testimony, they are more believable. It really makes people seem to be more believable and more of an expert. Yeah, so that's something that we see President Trump do a lot. Exactly what he's doing here, which is where he's doing it, but he's kind of holding it below his legs. So it's like that's sort of his default position is to do that.
Can you show the video just for KK while Dr. G is speaking? You keep the video there so we can look at it while he's speaking. Go ahead, Doctor. Say that again.
So, but you can see President Putin's doing it right now. President Trump goes back. They both actually go back and forth between steepling a little bit and then putting their hands like this. So to me, that says that neither one of them is trying to make any hugely overt gestures to be the top dog in this right now. Now, President Putin may feel like he's going to be in the long run, or maybe he knows how he's going to handle this meeting, but neither one is doing, you know, if he was sitting back and like taking up more room and then doing it like up high, then it would be much more likely that he's somebody who's like I'm in total control here. So we're not seeing any of that. We're seeing very much mimicked body language. They both look very, very similar right here in that sense.
You can keep playing.
Okay, sorry, let me.
Trump seems a bit pissed off with the journalists.
He really does. Like,
Face.
We know what he looks like when he's unhappy.
He doesn't hide it. Like you have to sit there trying to really analyze the smallest deviations to understand how he's feeling. Trump is like a billboard telling you exactly how he feels and when he messed up. And he just wants those journalists gone.
Now, one thing that they're both doing here is they're both leaning forward a little bit, which shows, once again, this attempt to connect. When somebody really wants to disconnect, and you're actually going to see this from President Putin in just a minute, and I'll show you, we do tend to unconsciously back up. Even though we're not literally gaining any real space from it, we do tend to back up our bodies a little bit. We'll back up like that. Somebody says something we don't like, we immediately kind of try to gain a bit of distance. So the fact they're leaning forward is positive, or appeared to positive, as far as that relationship goes.
And excited for the talks as well.
Absolutely.
Just go up. Thank Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, press. 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 Let's go. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go.
All right. So obviously we saw a pretty strong reaction from President Putin right there. Let's sort of break down what was happening here, because the challenging part is I don't know who he was responding to. Obviously, we could hear people talking, and it could be that he just isn't used to being spoken to by the press this way. But it may have been, I don't know if I'm not sure what he was specifically responding to. That's the hardest part about the context here, but I'll show you what I see at least, because if you watch his face, he looks confused for a second, but watch this.
Thank you, press. Let's go. Thank you, press.
So you see him lean forward like he's trying to hear.
Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you, press.
Let's go.
It blipped a little bit, so it's kind of hard to see, but he does one of these. He kind of backs up a little bit, which is backs up and shakes his head like it's like he doesn't like what he's hearing, or that he's he's backing away a little bit from what's being said out loud. But
yeah,
what
I think
it
he's
is,
been asked a few tough questions. Like we heard sorry to interrupt you. I think
Yeah,
so.
no, please.
But we did hear questions earlier when they just walked off after they met, and the questions were like, I think they were like, can how do we know we can trust President Putin, or are you going to keep killing innocent people? So
Right,
they were pretty
yeah.
direct questions at Putin, which I think made him potentially uncomfortable.
And so what I can't tell is whether or not if he was responding to one of those, which would make sense, or if it was more just the chaos of people, yelling out questions, or if somebody was nearby that was speaking directly to him, because it looked like he responded in a sense. It's just too much going on, and it's hard to hear what microphone picked up what. So I can't say specifically what he was responding to, but that backup and the head shake looked like he was hearing something he did not like.
Yeah, the way the press act in Russia, Belarus, I was in Belarus, and the way the press would ask me, they started asking me questions, the respect and the decorum, and they would wait for their turn. It's just a completely different world to what we see in Europe and the US. So I think maybe you're right that President Putin was just not expecting that flurry of questions for such a high stakes meeting.
Yeah.
Let's go. Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you, press.
Let's go.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Okay, so
Craziness.
yeah, I mean, just very, very.
So while you're preparing the second video, so one thing that I think your analysis will kind of explain later on, and by the way, you can play the video as soon as it's ready, Doctor. But what we're going to see is now the difference between their body language. What we saw now, the cordial, kind of enthusiastic, warm nature of both, both presidents, excited to see one another, excited for the talks to start, respectful, and then what you see later on is just a completely different aura from at least from President Putin. At least from President Trump.
Yes.
President Putin seemed kind of more happy with the result, or better at hiding his emotions.
Right, and I also
that press conference was not as expected either. The fact that President Putin started first, the fact that President Putin spoke 3 times longer, and President Trump didn't seem too happy about it. Seemed like he was caught off guard. But Doctor, we'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, let's just jump right in. All right. So you can already see, I knew immediately at this point, if you look at President Trump's face, you can see that there's that look of disapproval. So I knew that this had not gone well. Aside from the fact that obviously it happened very quickly, that look immediately told me this is not gone.
He needs a body language expert with him 24/7 to try to at least hide some of those emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We have very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes
So the first thing you're seeing, obviously, is that President Putin, he is someone who is very controlled when he's giving a prepared speech. Many people are, but this is what we're in at this point. This is not a passionate speech. It's one that has some feeling, but generally speaking, he's just orating. This is someone who he lifts his eyebrows to make you pay attention to his face when he's speaking sometimes, but you're not seeing much, if any, real emotion coming out as he talks.
The only time I've seen President Putin giving a speech and he was emotional was the one I was covering live during the mutiny. Not sure if you've seen that one when he gave a speech after Prigozhin
Yes.
was advancing to the Kremlin. That was
Yeah.
the only time I've seen Putin emotional. And
Yeah.
it was just a completely different facial expressions, completely different way of speaking than what we're seeing right now. President Trump was always the same. He was always open.
Yeah. This is pretty classic, pretty much classic Trump as far as his body language
Sense
goes.
that we've met here.
I'm
Because
going to turn
our
this down a little bit
countries,
while I talk about this.
though separated
Basically,
by the oceans,
President Trump
have
does not
close
sit
neighbors.
well and listen very easily.
So
Like
when
we
we've
can
met-
see this when he had meetings with Elon Musk, where Elon Musk would be talking, and the whole time President Trump was moving around. He would look at him some, but I don't think he sits and listens particularly well.
Yeah. He always fidgets. Which does that like with the fact that he's fidgeting there? Does that really say much about the meeting, or not really? Like, was he just annoyed that President Putin was speaking for that long, or just Trump being Trump?
I think that he would have been like, even if the meeting had gone extremely well, he would have done the same thing. He just doesn't listen to people speaking all that well. I just think that he wants to be talking, or I think, I'm not saying he has this diagnosis, but I recognize myself in that, because with my ADHD, I sometimes do the same thing. I get fidgety. Like, it's not that I don't care about what the other person has to say. I just have a hard time sitting still. And he's looking around at people. He just doesn't listen very easily.
Yeah, and I think he's also keen to have all the attention on himself.
Absolutely.
And he's just waiting for President Putin to finish, so then Trump could have his time in the limelight after such an important meeting.
Absolutely.
But there's not much here until President Trump speaks. I don't think there's much there
there's
from a
not.
body language perspective.
Yeah.
Because again, President Putin is just very controlled. He seemed relatively comfortable. You could have seen, I don't know if there's any certain tells here or there that could say otherwise, but he just either was composed and not showing any emotions, or comfortable with the result and as expected. And it feels like he's also prepped the speech that he gave.
Yeah, and basically, I'll skip ahead in just a second, but as you can see, what I look for when it comes to micro expressions, when it comes to like hidden body language, people will make weird expressions with their mouth, or they'll blink excessively. There's all sorts of things they do, and he doesn't do anything like that. I think that President Putin knew precisely how this meeting was going to go before it ever started. So I think he knew his position, and I expect that he knew, it went as expected for him. So yeah, this was prepared. He knew what he was going to say. It was just, he was very controlled in that moment.
Yeah, and I think the most important part of this entire meeting is what we're going to see now is when President Trump speaks. I think this will give us a lot of insight into the results from these meetings. And by the way, while you're playing this, Stefano cut off because he had internet connections. He's traveling right now.
Meeting. There were many points that we agreed on. Most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate. And I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with.
So if you've ever watched President Trump speak for more than 5 seconds, he always talks with his hands. I mean, he cannot help, but when he's feeling something, he's moving his hands out. He's all about emphasis, because he's a very good speaker in that sense, that when he wants you to pay attention to a specific part of what he's saying, he will make you listen to that. Like, he will really say it in a way where you know what he wants to talk about. I've seen this time and time again when there's topics that he's not particularly interested in. Somehow he'll turn it back to the things he wants to talk about, and that's when you see the hands go up, when you see the hands come out, when you really see him passionate about these things. And this is about as subdued a Trump as I have ever seen. Truly, like, he's emphasizing nothing right now. He's just being very plain, doing a lot of this. This tends to show aggression and frustration. We're baring our teeth a little bit. So breathing through the teeth, you're seeing him do that over and over again. He's frustrated. I think he's annoyed. He's clearly unhappy. So that's what we're seeing right here.
Yeah, what I could, what my interpretation of this is that he just didn't get his ceasefire, and that he's, initially before the meeting, he was talking about before they met, that he'll be unhappy if there's no ceasefire. And now he's kind of changed in the last few hours. He started speaking differently. I think he can't remember the exact quote, but he started hinting like, that his aim now is to get a full peace agreement rather than the ceasefire. So it seems based on the body language, he's not happy with the meeting where he wanted a ceasefire. Now he's talking about a full peace agreement rather than a ceasefire. So my guess would be that at the end of the meeting, President Putin did not agree to a ceasefire based on certain conditions, and he was seeking, either he had certain demands that President Trump knew were going to be difficult or impossible, because obviously he knows President Zelensky's position. They spoke before the meeting. Or President Putin just does not want to give Trump that win, because Trump showed his cards. Trump from the beginning says, everyone knows he's pretty keen on Nobel Peace Prize, which is a great goal to have. He said he wants to end the war in one day, in 24 hours. So his cards are clear. President Putin is maybe using that to his advantage and try to get as much as he can from Trump's desperation for a peace.
There's a couple of clues in here that I think hint at why he wasn't able to get what he wanted. And my belief would be very little of it has to do with what President Zelensky wants. I don't think that Trump cares as much, or at least didn't. Maybe he will now. Didn't care as much about that before. At some point, he talks about how they've come to some agreement, and he refers to Marco Rubio and somebody else. And I think that there are limits on what President Trump can do, and he's probably frustrated by that because, as Marco Rubio advising, he's probably like, you can and can't do this and that. And I think that some of what he can and can't do is guided by that, and that adds to the frustration because he can't just say, okay, this is what we're doing, we're moving forward like this. And I don't think that. I think that President Trump, and this is very true of a lot of business leaders, they envision themselves winning. That's how Olympic gymnasts or Olympic anybody get the gold, is they envision themselves winning over and over again. They don't think about losing. Like, that's not really in the cards. So I would imagine President Trump goes into this very high expectations, envisioning himself winning. That's probably how he's done. That's probably what he's done his whole career. And then when you don't, it's very deflating. It just kind of sucks to lose. And so I would consider, even though we made progress, I think he would see this as a loss. It's either all or nothing for him a lot of times.
What Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe, thank you very much.
See, he was talking about them and does this afterwards. There's something about them that is frustrating him right now, in my opinion.
But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here. And I think, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time. And
so very briefly, now that's where you see a little bit of a smile, a head nod. The emphasis just a little bit comes back when he's talking about America being the hottest world. So when he thinks about these things, he gets a little bit excited, but he's still pretty subdued.
We look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with.
Look at maybe we saw a bit of a positive here, is that when he talks about America being the hottest, the U.S. is right now brokering peace in one of the worst wars, the worst European war since World War II.
Yeah.
So I think there's maybe he realized that there is a win out of this, even though I didn't get the ceasefire I was seeking.
Yeah.
The world is looking at me, and I'm getting a step closer to peace. So I think there's maybe him realizing there's a bit of a win there.
Yeah, he walked away with the bronze medal instead of the gold or something like that, right? Which to him is like, okay, there's something there, but it's not what I wanted. So yeah, you're getting a little bit here and there.
Great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax. But
see, that's the first time you're seeing his hands move again. Once he gets into the things that he likes to talk about, he can't help but get a little bit animated because he feels passionate about this. He loves talking about the Russian hoax and all of these other things. Those are the subjects that he does well, and he knows his base likes to hear him talk about those things. So he likes these subjects.
And this also proves that deviation proves that he's subdued because of the meeting didn't go too well. It's not like he's feeling unwell or something else on top of his mind. When he talks about something that he's happy about, the U.S. being the hottest country in the world again, all the attention's on him in the U.S., or the Russia hoax being a hoax. So those two things are things he likes to talk about.
Yeah,
he starts being more animated. When he goes back to talking about the meeting, again, he's more tense. So again, that deviation shows you that the meeting was not great.
That's absolutely right. And I hadn't actually seen this last night. I just watched a clip of it today. But when he was talking to Sean Hannity after all this, he was back to being pretty animated and pretty energetic again. So he's not just tired here. We know that for sure.
what was done was very criminal, but it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things.
Now that's the first overture he's doing again to try to sort of connect with President Putin again. He's facing him. He wants to make sure that the lines are still open. He's frustrated, but he is still trying to maintain this relationship. So that facing him right there as he's talking about this is a way
and Doctor, it's interesting that he hasn't faced him much until now.
Right.
At the beginning, they were really like shaking hands, tapping each other. It was just very warm, etc. Maybe high expectations. And right now, it took him a while to face Putin. He's doing it kind of like, hey, I need to keep the bridge open. And it was not as easy to do it. Maybe he's just a bit frustrated by the outcome of the negotiations. Just did not go well. But he just doesn't want to show the world that negotiations went badly.
That's absolutely right.
That would not be a win.
Absolutely.
Things that would like to have dealt with, but we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting and many points were agreed to.
And why I don't believe that is because I'm telling you, his hands would have, if he really meant that, he would have said, we have an extremely productive meeting. There's no way he could not have resisted bringing his hands out to emphasize that point, because he really wants you to know, hey, this was just amazing, where we did so much progress. To me, that says it was way less than what he wanted.
There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here.
Probably pointing at Foreign Minister Lavrov. That would be my guess who he's pointing on. But just for the audience, what we're talking about them not reaching a deal. So Trump's goal, and Dr. G can add any context as well, but Trump's goal in this meeting is to get a deal with President Putin, a ceasefire deal. That was the big win. That he said it earlier, something along the lines that if we don't get a ceasefire, I'm not going to be too happy. I'm paraphrasing here. So Putin, if you listen to my interview yesterday or the day before with Colonel McGregor, his stance, which is shared by many, is that Russia has the upper hand right now on the front lines. They've gained a bit of ground over the last few weeks. So Russia is not in a position where they need to stop, where a ceasefire would serve them well, because they're gaining ground, and probably they can ask for significant demands. Where on the Western side, Europe is funding the war. Now they're supporting Ukraine financially or militarily more than the US as of 2-3 months ago. The US is hesitant to keep supporting Ukraine. They've cut their aid. And now there's even talks about whether the US should allow Europe to even buy weapons from the US to supply Ukraine. So the framework has changed significantly today to where it was a few months ago. Putin knows he's got the upper hand, and Putin's is winning the war of attrition. He's got a lot more men. I know Colonel McGregor and others think that Russia's not losing a lot of men, but even if they're losing the same amount of men as Ukraine, Europe and the US cannot send men to Ukraine. They can send weapons, but actually someone has to operate those weapons. So, and the last statistic I want to share as well to kind of get you to understand Putin's position is that at the beginning of the war, 75% of Ukrainians wanted to fight till the end. Today is about 25%. That's a massive drop. So Ukrainians are just fatigued. That puts Putin in a very strong position. The only way this could change, where Putin, it's my personal opinion, so you could disagree, but the only way this could change is that Trump goes ahead with secondary tariffs on India or further support for Ukraine, and then they have a meeting again. I think the framework will change where Putin's in a tougher spot. But when Putin's gaining ground, not Ukraine's gaining ground, Ukraine wants a ceasefire. Russia's not that incentivized to want a ceasefire. They don't want a ceasefire. They want a peace agreement, and they want their terms to be met. A few months ago, a year ago, it was the opposite. Russia wanted a ceasefire. The Ukrainian side, they're like, no, we want a peace agreement, not a ceasefire. So this is kind of the framework, give you an idea of both men's mindset when they came into the meeting. A win for Trump would be a ceasefire. A win for Putin could be, trying to get more of his terms met. And many said that Putin just being on American soil, being able to speak to Americans, what many called him a pariah who was sanctioned, the most sanctioned country in history, I think, for him to be on American soil, especially Alaska, which was Russian in the 1800s, before the US bought it in the 1860s for a few $1 million. That's already a win for Putin. So Putin had his win. and he spoke 3 times longer in the press conference than Trump. So that's enough of a win for Putin. He didn't need more than that. Where Trump needed something to show that we're getting closer to a ceasefire agreement, to a peace.
And Putin knew that he had he was the one that was ultimately going to be able to make or break the decisions in this process. He knew how it was all going to go. Whereas I think President Trump, it was a much more anticipatory of, what can I do here? What's going to happen? Putin already knew how it was all going to go down. So I think that that's part of the difference as well, is that President Putin's not disappointed because he knew what was going to happen already. And yeah, as you said, like, I don't think that there was ever any huge expectation on his end that somehow magically that the U.S. was going to make these huge concessions that was going to make him go, yeah, let's do a ceasefire. He knew that's not how that meeting was going to end, and that was surprising to Trump.
Yeah, exactly. And look, this is a meeting for a ceasefire. And there's only one country out of the 2 that met that is on the ground shooting, and that's Russia. The other side, Ukraine, is not in the meeting. So it's only one person that can say yes or no to a ceasefire, and that's Putin. So the cards are in Putin's hands, and obviously Trump. Look, we do have to say he wasn't. He was also hopeful. Disagree with me if you think so, but he didn't get what he wants, but it wasn't a total failure. It was what would some experts would say as expected. It was a step in the direction, setting the stage for further meetings. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that part of why President Trump has been so successful is because he sets his sights very high. He has high expectations for himself, and he wants to win it all. And for him, I think he has at times an all or nothing mindset. I didn't get exactly what I wanted, so it was a failure, but there may have legitimately been real progress that was made. So it probably was a win, but he might be the last person to really feel it.
Yeah, and I do want to point out also previous meetings between Trump and not meetings, calls between Trump and President Putin did not go too well. I don't remember the exact date, but right after the call, Russia just launched massive attacks on Ukraine, hundreds of drones. It was obviously the perfect indicator that things are not going well, and Trump saying, hey, I've got the upper hand. So I think if you look at the outcome of this meeting, where both sides seems positive to a different level, to different extents, versus other meetings where just Russia escalates their attack on Ukraine within hours from a meeting, and Trump is really disappointed, and it reduces the deadline from, I think it was like 30 days to 10 days, whatever it was. We're living in a different world where hopefully the meeting with Zelensky goes well as well, but things have improved. They're not going to go from, completely horrible to incredibly well, but at least we're heading in the right direction. That's how I see it. And despite Russia, we don't have a ceasefire. Russia was attacked Ukraine right after the meeting, but very minimal attacks. I think there was a few drones in Kharkiv near the front lines, which is constant. That's always happened, but there was no sudden massive barrage of drone attacks or missiles from the Russian side towards Ukraine, which shows maybe some sort of goodwill, not a ceasefire, but at least goodwill from Russia that we are heading in the right direction.
Yeah, that's how I would take that too. So yeah, I hope so.
And we'll finish off the meeting.
Good meetings over the years, right? Good productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all.
You can see also
thank you.
You can see the smile here from President Putin. It's a lot more sincere smile from President Putin.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just seems a lot happier.
He does. And, using the first name Vladimir, obviously that's a way to try to show affection of, I'm using your first name rather than just being using the calling him President Putin. So I think that he was trying to show we're still friendly. I just think he was once again just very disappointed.
Yeah, and we're going to play the Sean Hannity. I know you've watched a few clips. We're going to play a couple of clips from the Sean Hannity interview that was after that meeting. Maybe we could understand a bit further what the outcome of the meeting was, because there wasn't much said that we don't know, but hopefully the body language gives us a bit more insight of the outcome of the meeting. Jump with the audio.
When they're trying to blow up, and he would think we're crazy, with the made-up Russia hoax. So we had something very important, and we had a very good meeting today, but we'll see. I mean, it's you have to get a deal. We agreed on a lot of points. I want to see people stop dying in Ukraine, and that's what's happening. We're losing 5, 6, 7,000. They're Russians, mostly Russians, and they're Ukrainian soldiers. There's some people dying in cities and towns where they're trying to blow up missile manufacturers and other things in some cities. I don't know if you know what's going on there, but there are a lot of people dying. And if we can end that war, it would be very good. And I was very happy to hear him say, if I was president, that war would have never happened.
Mr. President, that was my
So on that point there,
He
so
said-
just pause it here just for a second. So on that point, first I want to get your thoughts on that clip. There was a few things said that were important, but the body language didn't shift much. Maybe you saw something I didn't. And at the end, he talks about, Putin did say something that, some people saw as, being, kind of giving Trump a win, at least with his audience, with the voters. And that's, if Trump was president, the war wouldn't have happened. And Putin gave him that. And that's something that Trump has been saying for a long time. And when Trump said that, he became a lot more animated. I think he shook his head a bit. I'm not sure if you saw that. So he was happy with that. So it's kind of Putin, I wouldn't call it bait, but Putin kind of gave him that compliment to use, kind of a bit of a small win. And Trump enjoyed that small win and is using it now in the interview. But beyond that, there wasn't much body language when he's talking about, it was a very good meeting. We got some things done, whatever he said. There was not much movement there unless you saw something.
No, I mean, a lot of that, what I actually did see was that, because I just saw a very brief clip of this previously, so I haven't watched this yet. What I'm seeing right now is that there was a little bit more energy there than there was immediately after, sort of after announcing, okay, this is not how I wanted it to go. He seemed a little bit more connected to what he was saying. So I think that he was starting at that point to recognize a little bit of like, okay, like this meeting was positive. I didn't get what I wanted, but there was some positivity there. So he still doesn't feel enthusiastic about it, but he seems somewhat less dejected when speaking to Sean Hannity about this. And you can see how far forward he was leaning when talking to Sean Hannity. He's really leaning in. I mean, that's obviously somebody he knows well at this point, so he has a good relationship with him. But he wasn't like backing up a little bit. He wasn't trying to create distance because he doesn't want to have to answer these questions. So it seems like he's being pretty straightforward right now about how he feels.
Watch one more clip.
Press conference that and you have said this many, many times, and he confirmed for the world today that if you were president, this wouldn't have happened. Did any of the specifics come up as to why he said that?
It did. It doesn't matter at this point, but that this war should never have happened. A lot of wars should never have happened. There was stupid things go down and the wrong people are talking, but Biden was a terrible president in so many ways. He should have never let it happen. And it did. There are millions of people killed. I mean, it's the worst thing since I see everyone saying worst since World War II by far. There's nothing even close. But we had a very good meeting today, and I think a lot of points were negotiated on behalf of Ukraine and on
I want to
behalf
point something
of
out really quickly.
the whole.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that I noticed is that when he said, and this was hard to see, but you can see I was talking about steepling earlier. He was doing that during most of the interview, most of when he's talking to Sean Hannity. But as soon as he said the meeting went really well today, his fingers crisscrossed like this. Like,
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's subtle, but you'll notice that that's once again a point of contention for him. He's not feeling great still talking about it. But once again, one of the things we're not seeing is deception, and that's one of the things I look really closely for. I'd say if there's any area in body language that I most focus on more than anything else, it's deception. And right now, knowing his baseline body language, once again, he may not be super enthusiastic, but I'm not seeing things that appear like they're outright lies or there's anything he's saying that he doesn't believe.
Yeah, it's just for the audience. The steepling is that show of dominance when you're confident about something you're saying or confident about your position in a certain meeting. And then when he does that, moves away from the steeple and crosses his fingers, it just shows that it's a deviation. He's uncomfortable with something. And he did that, as you noticed, Doctor, and I didn't notice it. He did that when he's talking about the meeting going well, which shows or indicates that the meeting did not really go well. When he says that he's uncomfortable, he's not really confident with what he's saying.
That's right.
Exactly.
Let me examine it. Oh, there it is.
That's where you were saying.
That's it. I would say that's it. Yep.
So did you have alone time with him?
Yeah, I did. I did actually after our speeches. He made a very good speech, and I also finished it up. And afterwards, we spoke. Right after that, we spoke very sincerely. I think he wants to see it done.
Yeah. In your press conference, you talked.
Could he talk when he says he wants? I want to see
it
it done now.
And maybe one.
Yeah.
So I want to see it. He wants to see it get it done. That's an important statement. Does his facial expression say anything? Or not?
To me, his facial expression, it's displeasure. Like he does not. Once again, President Trump can't. I probably can, but he doesn't tend to hide what he feels. And so, right there, I think anybody that looks at that can see that his face that is a face of someone who is he doesn't feel particularly pleasant at that moment after he says that. So,
Okay.
whether or not he actually believes that he wants to get it done, maybe he doesn't believe it will get done, but there's something about that really looked unhappy.
Or maybe President Putin's just not as keen, or he doesn't need to get it done as much as President Trump would like him
Absolutely.
to.
Yeah.
We'll go to the last clip from the Sean Hannity interview.
He wants to see it done.
Yeah. In your press conference, you talked about a lot of things that you agreed on, and maybe one big issue you don't agree on. Are you prepared to go public with that?
No, I'd rather not. I guess somebody's going to go public with it. They'll figure it out. But no, I don't want to do that. I want to see if we can get it done. You know, it's not a done deal at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
So if you look at his brow right now, you're seeing a little bit of anger. You know, like when our eyebrows come together like that. When he starts talking about this, he's doing the teeth a little again. His eyebrows are coming together a little bit. You know, he's and the hard part with that context is I don't know if he's annoyed that somebody's going to talk about it or how it went. I think he's actually reacting to the idea that it's going to be leaked, because I just think he assumes that everything that gets talked about gets leaked at some point. So he seems annoyed at the idea that at some point people are going to be talking about this.
Zelensky has
If he's annoyed about it, that must be something not that pleasant, maybe something important.
And both of them are.
That's what I would think.
And hopefully it can get completed. That'll be a great achievement for them. Forget about me.
Yeah.
For them. And you'll save 7,000 lives a week. That's a lot.
I spoke very briefly to Secretary of State Rubio, and he did say to me, he goes, there's a difference when you're in the same room together than versus, you know, talking to each other through the press.
Even through the phone? You know,
even through the phone.
It's not the same thing when you're on a
That was
telephone.
interesting.
It's not
That's
the
something
same
that he
thing
doesn't
either.
normally do. I haven't actually caught him do that very often. After that was said, he actually looked at the camera. So that made him think about the fact there's an audience. We see this in trials all the time. That when somebody's about to say something important, or they're saying something that's very consequential, they'll look over because they remember there's a camera looking at them. So for some reason, them talking about that made him think about the fact that there's an audience, which I just thought was interesting.
Does that make him think twice before saying something?
Possibly, very possibly. It makes him think about what he's going to say could be consequential, or could be something that people are going to react to. I would expect that's what he was thinking.
3 hours, and it was very extensive, and we agreed on a lot of points. I mean, a lot of points we agreed on, but there's not that much. There's, you know, one or two pretty significant items, but I think they can be reached. Now it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done. And I would also say the European nations.
This is really weird.
That's it, because President Zelensky, it's up to President Zelensky to get it on. Him and Zelensky don't get along too well. But I love how he shows it so overtly. Let's finish that last
to
comment.
get it done. And I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit. But it's up to President Zelensky. I think we are. And if they'd like, I'll be at that next meeting. They're going to set up a meeting now between President Zelensky and President Putin and myself, I guess. You know, I didn't ask you about it. Not that I want to be there, but I want to make sure it gets done. And we have a pretty good chance of getting it done.
If you had to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10.
So I think the meeting was a 10.
You could hear
in the
him
sense that we got along
breathing
great,
through his teeth when he was asked that question. They asked him to rate it, and he doesn't want to.
That was the rate. That breathing is the rating. That was the rating.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Let's see what it is.
You know, two
Go back to the
big powers get along, especially when they're nuclear powers. You know, we're number one, they're number two in the world, and it's a big deal. That's a big deal. You never want to even mention that word. The word nuclear. But
so he said in his answer that it was a 10 out of 10. But I think in his body reaction, we immediately spotted it and go 10 out of 10. I think you agree. Like it was not. Yeah, it didn't go as he liked.
President Trump would be the last person to acknowledge something in that way, just because that's his style. So he's not going to say, you know, I would never anticipate that he would give it a real rating. He's always going to say, yeah, it's 10 out of 10. You know, that's very much his style.
I agree. And so, Doctor, final thoughts on the meeting. My take is, I think I've said it already, the meeting did not go as well as, it didn't go horribly wrong. There was no indication that it was a complete disaster, complete train wreck. For President Putin, I felt he was pretty happy. It was a win for him. he got what he hoped for. He didn't need much for a win, even if it's a small win. For President Trump, he needed a lot for a win because the expectations were high. Everyone expected or hoped for a ceasefire, and that was really not feasible. I think anyone that's really been following this, a ceasefire is not that easy to achieve, especially without Europe and President Zelensky on the table. But it seems that, maybe even we're not as close as we would like to be to a ceasefire based on what we've seen from Trump's body language. You've really gone into the details, but even a person that's not an expert as you are could easily tell that Trump was a lot happier at the beginning than he was afterwards.
Sure.
But yeah, that's my take. Doctor, final words.
So a couple of things, and then I'm going to give a piece of body language advice to everybody because we talked about steepling, and this is an important one. So my takeaway from it is that he has real genuine optimism that he's going to accomplish these things, and that's actually a good thing. He actually goes into that believing we're going to make progress. I'm going to get a ceasefire. This isn't performative for him. He's not just doing it because it's some sort of political theater. He really is going in there going, we're going to walk away with a ceasefire. It didn't happen, so obviously he was disappointed. But I think that it does speak positively to the mentality of like, I'm actually trying to do this. This was not, once again, this is not political theater in some sense. So in that way, it's not a bad thing that we saw him appearing more dejected and frustrated and all of that. If we hadn't seen that, that would mean that he wasn't really expecting to accomplish that in the first place. And then really, what's the point of this if it's really just for show? So I think in a lot of ways that was actually very positive. Now, on to what I'm going to caution everybody about body language wise, because we've talked about steepling. We talked about this a few times. Here, I'll show it back here. If you have earned the ability to be an expert and for people to trust you, go ahead, steeple all you want. I see Elon Musk, whenever Elon Musk talks, he does that. He does that constantly, and he's earned the right to. He's the richest and one of the most powerful men in the world. So if anybody should be allowed to steeple, it's him. However, if you are like 20 years old and you're trying to talk to somebody who is a boss, or you're trying to talk to somebody and appear as the expert, you're going to annoy them if you do that. So you have to be very careful with your position in life and whether or not that's something that you can get away with, because people will unconsciously be annoyed with you if they don't feel like you have earned the ability to do that. So I just wanted to point that out. Use steepling cautiously.
Yeah, and I'll link that to the meeting we saw now. If you go back to watch the video, Trump and Putin were the only two people steepling in that meeting, but it had some of the most powerful people by their side, Marco Rubio, Lavrov, etc. So none of them steepled because Trump and Putin are in the room. But in any other room, they'll be the ones steepling. So I think you use with caution, because even people that don't understand body language, what's funny is that body language, you don't need to really understand it to understand it. Because I can't remember, what's the percentage of communication that's body language versus, words?
I'm not sure we have a realistic. I would say that it's probably 60 or 70% of communications body language. Realistically, it's a big part.
So exactly, more than what you speak is what you say body wise, and that means people understand body language, even though they might not know this is called steepling. What it means, they know when someone spreads their legs and does this, they will feel intimidated without really knowing what it means. And that's why I think you should use it wisely.
Absolutely.
Doctor, pleasure to meet you. Absolute pleasure. It was great analysis, and hopefully we do it again. Maybe we'll talk about maybe doing it for the Zelensky-Trump meeting.
You got it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.